Your Excellency, Very Reverend Father, honorable participants and guests to this event, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this beautiful Kuyumjan Hall. My name is Peter Haig, and I am the representative of the Armenian Catholic Eparchy to the United Armenian Council of Los Angeles, also known as UACLA. The UACLA is a body consisting of more than 50 religious, political, compatriotic, benevolent, cultural groups representing the majority of the Armenian people, mainly in charge of the commemoration of the Armenian Genocide Monument, which is one of the biggest and oldest that we have in Montebello. We also participate and organize events such as this one to promote the awareness of the Armenian genocide. Today, we have the pleasure to work with our brothers from the Armenian Bar Association to present to you an unprecedented seminar that will shed some new light toward getting our justice with regards to the Armenian genocide. Now it is a pleasure and honor for me to invite His Excellency, Most Reverend Michael Muradian, Bishop of the Armenian Catholic Eparchy in the US and Canada, to make the official invocation of today's special event. Your Excellency.
Very Reverend Father Barkev, Pakrad Berjikian, honorable guests, representatives of the Armenian political parties, dear brothers and sisters. On behalf of the Armenian Catholic Eparchy of Northern America, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all in this Kuyumjan Hall to participate to this unprecedented seminar about the reparations for the Armenian genocide. First, I would like to acknowledge and appreciate all the hard and challenging work done so far by the United Armenian Council of Los Angeles for the commemoration and recognition of the 20th century's first genocide known as the Armenian Genocide. For years, the UACLA has worked diligently in preserving and passing the legacy of our holy martyrs to the current and the new generation. Today's seminar is the opening of a new chapter in understanding and demanding the perpetrators and their heirs, the current Turkish government, that for justice to prevail, reparation has to be acknowledged and paid to the victims and their descendants. The work accomplished by the Armenian Genocide Reparation Study Group, presented today by Professor and Ambassador Arababian and Dr. Henri Theriault, is an additional step toward achieving our people's right and just demands. Today, we are witnessing an escalation of the Azeri aggression in our beloved Nagorno-Karabakh, and once again, our people is faced with shelling and killings. Nevertheless, we will continue worldwide our struggle against injustice, defending the rights of our people to live in peace and harmony in our motherland Armenia and the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh. Once again, I welcome you all and ask our Lord to grant us His heavenly wisdom and blessings, and may He grant peace and rest to the souls of our martyred brothers and sisters. I would like to invite Father Pakrad to join me to pray together our Lord's Prayer. Please stand up. Օրնյալ դեր մեր Հիսուս Քրիստոս ամեն հայր մեր որ երգինս ես սուրբ յայցի անունքո եկես սարքայությունքո յայցին գամքո որբես երգինս եւ երգրի զհաց մեր հանավազոր դուր մեզ այսօր եւ թող մեզ զբարդիս մեր որբես եւ մենք թողնք մերոց զբարդաբանած եւ մի դանիրս մեզի փորձություն այլ պրգյազ մեզի չարե Զիկոյ արքայություն եւ զորություն եւ փառք Հավիդյանս Սկորձս սերած մերոց ուղիղ արայի մեզ դեր եւ սկորձս սերած մերոց աճողիա մեզ ամեն
Your Excellency, Very Reverend Father, and dear guests, I wish to welcome you all, Pariegak, to today's seminar on the Armenian genocide and requests for reparations. Before I begin my introductory remarks, I would like to acknowledge the presence of a very special guest here today. He's the first foreign minister of the Republic of Armenia. He's a former member of the Parliament of Armenia. He's the founder of the Armenian Bar Association. He's also the founder of the Heritage Party of Armenia, and he's been a person who has inspired all of us by his relentless striving to establish truth, justice, and the rule of law in Armenia. Please welcome Mr. Rafi Hovhannisyan today as our special guest. "101 years ago, the Armenian citizens of the Ottoman Empire were subjected to what United States President Theodore Roosevelt called the greatest crime of the war. The renowned lawyer Raphael Lemkin created a legal term to describe what happened to the 1,500,000 Armenians that perished at the hands of the Turks. The term he used to describe the mass murder of the Armenian people is genocide. Beyond the murder and destruction of the Armenian nation in its historic homeland, the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire were also deprived collectively and individually of all of their real and personal property. The state-organized theft of their collective wealth has been termed the Great Dispossession. In jurisprudence, a fundamental notion in criminal proceedings is that the victim should be made whole as best as can be accomplished. This process of making the victim whole is called restitution. In circumstances of mass crimes, it is called reparations. Today, the quest of the Armenian people to recover reparations for the murder of their families and the theft of their property has remained elusive and virtually non-existent. Thus, the great crime that President Roosevelt spoke of has gone unpunished. The United Armenian Council of Los Angeles is an organization of over 50 of the largest community associations. Its purpose is to commemorate, educate, and seek the recognition of the Armenian genocide and its consequences. Today, the UACLA has brought together some of the best and brightest scholars who have devoted their lives to researching and writing about the subject of the Armenian genocide and reparations for its consequences. This morning, you will hear from Professor Henry Theriault and Mr. Ara Babyan, co-authors of the Armenian Genocide Reparation Study Group treatise entitled Resolution with Justice. Attorney Armen Hovhannisyan will moderate the morning panel. Mr. Papyan's and Mr. Theriault's presentations will be followed by a question and answer session and then a lunch break. By the way, a couple of housekeeping matters. A delicious boxed lunch will be available for purchase at lunch, and you can purchase that at the front desk. Also tonight, following the day's events, there's going to be a dinner at Kavar Restaurant in Hollywood. You are all invited, and a ticket can be purchased for that as well. Please see Mr. Razmik Hovhannisyan later today to purchase the ticket. Also, there are several books here today that have been authored by Mr. Papyan for purchase. They are at the back table, and one of them concerns President Wilson's Arbitral Award. Another one focuses on the National Geographic's coverage of Armenia and Armenians. So if anyone's interested, you can see them in the back table. There's also available for purchase a package of genocide education material that has been prepared. It contains books and videos and several documents that can help educate students about the Armenian genocide. Finally, if anyone is in need of quarters for the meters, there's also extra quarters in the back that can be exchanged for dollars. Following our lunch, our organizing committee chairman, Mr. Ara Aharonyan, will serve as master of ceremonies. The afternoon panel will feature international law expert attorney Karni Kirkonyan and Turkish legal system scholar attorney Edvin Minasyan. The legal panel will be moderated by highly respected criminal defense attorney and co-chairman of the Armenian Rights Watch Committee of the Armenian Bar Association, Mr. Garo Ghazarian. The final panel of the day will focus on the political perspective. We are very fortunate and proud that representatives of each of the three major political parties have agreed to be united on stage to present their analysis. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Hasmik Baran, Professor of Armenian Studies at California State University, Northridge. Finally, the day will conclude with all panelists answering your questions. This panel will be moderated by the United Armenian Council co-chairs, Mr. John Kosakian and Mr. David Samuelyan. As you listen today to the speakers, you should ask yourself, are the events that are taking place today in Artsakh somehow connected to the genocide or to the issue of reparations? Are there legal remedies under international law available to the Armenian community for all that was taken from them? If so, who can assert those rights on our behalf? The Republic of Armenia, the churches, individuals? What can be expected? Is this all theory, or can concrete results be realized? We believe today's presentation will provide enlightening answers to these and many other questions. Now, it is my profound joy and privilege to welcome to the podium the three-time chairperson of the Armenian Bar Association, the chairman of the Armenian Bar Association's Reparations Committee, a graduate of one of our nation's top universities, UCLA Law School, and the heart and soul of the Armenian Bar Association. Please join me in welcoming Armen Hovhannisyan, attorney, to moderate the first panel.
Hi, Luis. Good morning. While most of the normal working world on gray and rainy Saturdays like this aspire to the more traditional interpretation of the term R&R, namely rest and relaxation, the bleeding hearts and open wounds of the Armenians do not allow for such lightness and luxury. Our collective, and some would say unenviable, rendition of the term R&R is altogether different. It is now, and it seems for the rest of our lives, to mean recognition and reparations. Rest and relaxation, we'll leave those nice things to the others. Today, we are very privileged to have on this panel the legal, academic, and political science cartographers who have worked together for 10 years to draw the map and to chart the courses, not the single course, but the courses of restorative justice. They are, and their biographies are in your materials, but in summary fashion, Henry Theriault, professor of philosophy, chairman of the department at Worcester State University, and Mr. Ara Babyan, political science specialist, former ambassador of the Republic of Armenia to Canada, and in absentia, but represented by his colleagues here, and by his white paper that you have in your program today, Dr. Alfred Desaias. You know, starting about 10 years ago, these three men, joined by Professor Jermaine McAlpin, came together to form the Reparation Study Group, each lending a very, very different yet complementary dimension to this very comprehensive study of the pursuit of reparations, and the nuanced and the somewhat controversial role that recognition plays in that overall objective. That defining work, which you're going to hear about right after my short presentation by Professor Thériault, was published last year in the Centennial of the Armenian Genocide. Till very recently, recognition for many people and for many years was the end game. But the playing field and the pitch have changed their shape dramatically. The goalposts which before we wanted just to catch and capture apology and recognition, now goes beyond. It's reparation, restitution. Desius builds the foundation of the legal structure and of the operational apparatus. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today because of health reasons, but his groundbreaking work stands very firmly in his place. What is it known for? That work is known to be an analysis of, and the final conclusion that the Genocide Convention of 1948 does have retroactive application to the Armenian Genocide of 1915 to 1923, not only based on itself, but the prior international laws and agreements, and by something called natural law. Thériault pushes the envelope. He pushes the envelope and he fills it with letters of ethics and morality and universality. He discusses the social and societal-based issues which are necessary to create and strengthen the political will which will change legal possibilities into reality. But he acknowledges this, and he'll tell you this today. Ethics and the imperative of doing what is right and what is just, they need to be tethered. They need to be tied to a resolution strategy, to a concrete plan to give meaning to otherwise abstract and theoretical thoughts. Thériault makes that connection very convincingly. Babian infuses in this project a special touch, a diplomatic touch, with a wide historical lens, but a laser focus on treaty-specific analysis. The 1920 and 21 treaties of Alexandropol and Moscow and Kars, for most of the world, they all but legitimize the misappropriation of Armenia's rights to the historic lands, to the larger lands, to Partsarhaik, to the Arevmedian side of Ararat. But what does Babian say? Babian says, calm down, everybody. Hold your horses. He says those treaties were signed by parties and by people who were not recognized under international law to have the standing, to have the representative authority and the binding authority that they supposedly had. He says, don't worry. And as for the Treaty of Sèvres, to which many of us look at least for moral and persuasive support of the restorative justice in general and return of homelands in particular, but again, which most of the world says, wait a minute, isn't that an empty letter? It was never ratified. Here comes Babian again. Don't worry, he tells all of us. Don't worry. Because the Wilson Arbitral Award, which was embedded in that Treaty of Sèvres, has a life and existence in and of itself. It doesn't need the Treaty of Sèvres to have been ratified, to have its own standing, its own back, its own future, and its own promise. Because on that Wilson Arbitral Award appeared the signature of Woodrow Wilson, appeared the embossed engraving of the Great Seal of the United States of America. So in conclusion, the common thread throughout Mr. Babian's, Professor Thériault's, Dr. Desaias' multidisciplinary contributions is that conventional wisdom sometimes has to be challenged, sometimes has to be turned on its head. And if it were ever to be challenged, if it were ever to be turned on its head, it's for the Armenian reparations initiatives. The moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, as we'll hear today, is don't let anyone convince you that the law on the punishment and prevention of genocide does not apply to the Armenian genocide, because it does. Don't let anyone tell you that ethical considerations have no place in the discussion about reparations, because they do. And most importantly, don't let anybody try to tell you that these words and phrases and sentences that try to withdraw from us our rights as an indigenous people to our indigenous lands have no meaning whatsoever, and they're not worth the paper they were written on. That's the argument that you'll hear today. So we will start our program with Professor Thériault, who is going to present to you in summary fashion the written product of their 10-year magnum opus. And so I'd like to introduce you, Henry. Call you up.
It's right here? Great. Let me just start by saying, you know you're in trouble when the person who is setting the table for the panel is so eloquent that there's no chance you can come up with anything quite that impressive. And I have to say, as an aside, I have tremendous respect for Richard Hovnessian, Armin's father, and you just outdid him, I think, in terms of your eloquence, which is incredible. How should I have to get this. Okay. And, I'm sorry, you're seeing, there have been a lot of historical moments for Armenians, good and bad. You're seeing possibly the most trivial right now. It's the first time I've ever done a PowerPoint presentation, so bear with me with the technical difficulties. All right, do I just flip this on? Okay. Okay. All right, and I can start. I just wanted to thank so many people who made this possible, starting with, do I have to, I'm sorry. We're trying to get the thing going. I'm gonna do a quick technical thing. Oh, thank you.
Let's see.
And then just go down, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it, yeah.
We just.
Yep,
do it
perfect,
this way.
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will start off with the United Armenian Council of Los Angeles and all of the member organizations, which number about 50, and really are creating a model for Armenian, I'll say, activism and community building at the same time for not just California or the United States, but for the world. This is a really, really important initiative and needs to be highlighted, I think, a lot as a model. The Armenian Bar Association continues to do incredibly important work around all sorts of Armenian issues, and we're so thrilled to have co-founders, presidents, so forth here. They make a huge impact in the community, make a huge impact, I think, for Armenians outside of the community, presenting our issues and concerns to the broader, not just public, but legal community, political community, and so forth. That backbone is so important. St. Gregory's Armenian Catholic Church and His Eminence Bishop Muradian for opening this beautiful hall to us and welcoming us in this wonderful way. Our Heronian, I have to just say, has been incredible in terms of organizing and getting me here and all sorts of things, so I want to thank him as well. And I also should say there are so many other people that have been involved. It would be, I would have a very long list, and believe me, I can talk for 3 hours without taking a breath, but I would use probably 2 of that, thanking everybody who deserves to be thanked. And then again, just Armin Hovnessian for introducing the panel in such a powerful and enlightening way, and sort of opening this discussion, really looking at and highlighting for us that this is an issue of principle, ethical principle, law, and very practical politics all together, and we need to keep them all in our eyesight. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of background on the report, and then Ambassador Pabian will come up and explain the incredibly innovative approach he takes to particular historical treaty issues, which have opened up a whole realm of possibilities. And then I'll come back and touch on, just for a few minutes, some of the contemporary role of reparations for Armenians today, particularly after this week with Artsakh. So, just very quickly, you already heard the four co-authors, each of whom, except for me maybe, contributed what I think are really, really innovative ideas that don't have relevance just to the Armenian case, but really have relevance to any case of group reparations, even beyond genocide. And I do believe, and this is already the case to an extent, that this report will be studied by people outside of the Armenian community as much as inside, because of the theoretical and historical work that it presents. Let me also say that we were formed in 2007, as you heard. The report is very long. Fortunately, for anyone who doesn't want to spend 150 pages getting the basic understanding of the issues, there's also an executive summary which you can use. We have a website, which I'm also happy to share after the program. And right now, we have a full report. The full report is available in Armenian, English, and now just recently Spanish. So we're excited about that, and hopefully Turkish and Russian and French will follow at some point in the not too distant future. The overview of the report, let me just start by saying these are the key sections. We talk about the harms that the genocide did, and I'm going to touch on those in the second part of my remarks at the end of this panel, only because we sometimes, even though we understand how devastating the genocide was for Armenians, we sometimes don't appreciate just how comprehensive the harms done to Armenians were, and how much of an impact they have on us today, on our communities in every area of the world, including the Republic and Artsakh. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. We had the legal analysis, treaty history and analysis, ethical analysis, answer to objections, which is really important because many times there are these obvious objections people raise which are meant to discredit the very notion of asking for reparations, particularly for a group 100 years after the initial harm was done. The political process, we have a very innovative political process, which I'll touch on in a little bit. And then a concrete set of proposal suggestions and implementation ideas for how to transform an abstract right for reparations into a practical project of getting reparations from Turkey. There are different elements that we look at in terms of what we expect as part of a reparations package, and quite often discussions of reparations, particularly theoretical ones, distinguish material reparations from symbolic reparations. So material reparations are, return of territory, payments for lost businesses, and so forth. On the other hand, symbolic are things like apologies, educational initiatives, commemorations, and so forth. And our view from the beginning was that these two aspects are intertwined and equally important. As Jermaine McAlpin contributed to the report, just having material reparations without an apology and an acknowledgement for what they're for really translates into a financial payoff. But on the other hand, just having an apology without backing it up with a meaningful sacrifice on the part of the perpetrator group becomes an empty gesture that allows the perpetrator group essentially to get away with what it did, to keep all the benefits of what it did and use a little rhetorical trick to make everything seem okay in the present. Couple other, so as we look at these issues, return of territory is really important. Ambassador Babian will talk about that in detail. I'll touch on that a little bit later on as well. We estimated, based on the Paris Peace Conference calculations and other kinds of things, like using the New York life settlement as a model for understanding what a quote-unquote Armenian life was worth or would be worth today. And so we came up with a figure of roughly $100 billion US for reparations in addition to territory. We also have this innovation of a Truth and Rectification Commission that would operate in Turkey with participation by Armenians, Turks, and third-party representatives. And I want to emphasize, one of the reasons I asked Jermaine McAlpin to join this team early on was because of his brilliant innovation. Most people, when they see TRC, think of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what he argued back in 2005 is that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is really, really impossible, in the sense that if you just go for truth, you can't expect reconciliation to follow. What you need is a Truth and Reparations, or a Truth and Rectification Commission, because the truth should lead to dealing with the history in a concrete, meaningful way. Then maybe you can have, for Armenians and Turks, I would say not reconciliation, because I don't think there was a time in our history where things were particularly great in terms of intergroup relations, but conciliation. We can build towards some positive future. Education about the genocide within Turkey and outside of Turkey is crucial. We're seeing little bits and pieces in Turkey now of a growing segment of the population becoming aware of the real history of the Armenian genocide and starting to engage it. For Turkey to change from a perpetrator state that even today sees no problem with supporting violent aggression against Armenians and against other minority groups, there needs to be a real understanding of what Turkish history has included and what some of the ideological and prejudicial attitudes that are still acceptable in Turkish society as a legacy of the genocide lead to. As much as many contemporary Turks pretend that the genocide is a past issue, it's deeply embedded in the fabric of Turkish society, Turkish political, military, and cultural institutions, and attitudes on the ground of average people. And the only way that can change is through a serious process of education and rehabilitation. And of course, globally, the Armenian case, which is being much more recognized and has been much more recognized in the last 10 years, needs to be a warning sign and a lesson for the rest of humanity. And also, people around the world need to understand the history of the Armenian genocide in order to properly appraise Turkish policies towards the Armenian Republic and diasporan Armenians, and of course, by extension, Azerbaijan's policies. And there needs to be an understanding of this history in order to put pressure against Turkey from replicating past violence and past attitudes against Armenians. Obviously, commemorative programs and other types of memorialization are very important for preserving a history and in some sense showing respect to the people who died and also those who survived and suffered so much in their lives. And this is something that needs to happen in Turkey as part of that education process and outside as well. We make efforts from the Armenian community to do this, but this needs to be a burden on Turkey to provide funding and support for these kinds of activities. And last, in terms of implementation, we call for an international oversight committee. And since we have at least one, well actually two very impressive and prominent Armenian political figures here today, I can maybe say this say this in a pointed way. We have to face facts that the government we have in Armenia is not necessarily the most responsible when it comes to all Armenian issues, and a reparations process purely in their hands may raise some significant problems. There needs to be an international oversight committee, possibly through the UN, and there also needs to be a full participation of Armenians in Turkey, Armenians in the Republic, and Armenians from the diaspora to work out how a reparations process should happen and where the resources that are gained should go, how to prioritize the needs of Armenians inside and outside of the Republic, and where to go with that. I'll talk, as I said, briefly about the harms in the second half of my presentation. The legal analysis, you have a really helpful guide from Alfred de Zayas. Ambassador Pabian will, in his presentation you can get, I think is in the back or in your program. Ambassador Pabian will give us a great treatment of his innovations on the Treaty of Sèvres and the Wilson Arbitration Award, and he'll present shortly. I just wanted to say two additional things. How am I doing for time? Where are we? Okay. So just for a few more minutes on Jermaine McAlpin's contributions, and then a little bit of the material that I contributed to sort of set the table for Ambassador Pabian. As I mentioned, Jermaine McAlpin is a tremendous innovator in the field of political science and has come up with really genuinely new ideas in terms of what people call transitional justice. That is, how do you go from a society that committed genocide, held slaves, or some other kind of mass atrocity, how do you take that society forward to democratize it and to change its attitudes toward the victim groups and change its society so it's no longer capable and no longer inclined toward the violence that it did and the oppression that it did? We know in the case of Turkey that nothing really has been done to accomplish that, and we see the results even 100 years later. The attitudes in Turkey, and this isn't all Turks, there are some great people in Turkey today doing important things on behalf of Armenian issues, but in terms of the political leadership, the intellectual, political, and very importantly, military elite, the attitudes that typically meet Armenians and Armenian issues are very similar and have their origins in the attitudes that led to and caused the execution of the genocide. And until that changes, we will face a very, very difficult situation with Turkey. Jermaine McAlpin has argued that this process of a truth commission could fundamentally transform Turkish society. Other societies have gone through it with some success and maybe sometimes not so much success, but places like South Africa, Guatemala, and many others, Sierra Leone and so forth, have had truth commissions that have had some kind of impact. Even Canada today has a truth commission that started in 2010 to deal with its treatment of Native Americans in the 20th century. And again, it's meeting with mixed results, but it's representing some important steps forward. Australia, you see some of the same things with the Sari campaign and other elements. Turkey needs this. Needs it not just to change how it deals with Armenians, but it needs it to be a better society itself. The history of Turkey in the 20th century has been a history of oppression of minorities and oppression of Turks who are outside the government sort of mainstream, of Turks who are challenging the economic, political, and military status quo of Turkey, and so forth. Turkey has engaged in torture, mass violence. We're all familiar with this with the Kurds. Again, the Kurds are being subjected to this by Turkey. And a sort of quashing of genuinely democratic potentials within Turkey that's debilitating for it, that's harmful, very harmful in its relations with Armenians, and that has implications for the entire region. So this is a method, using the Armenian genocide as a lever to change Turkey, not only will have tremendous impact, positive impact for Armenians, but for Turkey as well. And in one sense, yet again, I sound a little nationalistic here, Armenians are set to contribute a great deal to Turkey and to Turks, as we had before the genocide, and to a degree since the genocide. It's very important, and I have a few notes here, that the point of this is not simply to rehearse what happened to Armenians and have a debate between Turkish deniers and people who represent a true perspective on what happened in the 1915 period. That's not the purpose. Some truth commissions, and they usually fail because of this, do not actually start with the truth, but believe that they can mediate some kind of agreement between perpetrator group and victim group. And the result of that is almost necessarily a compromised position that does not get at the real truth and does not put the perpetrator group in the position of having to confront what actually happened. okay? There's a quote by Nietzsche many, many years ago, and Nietzsche's a problem as a philosopher, had a lot of issues from anti-Semitism and misogyny and all sorts of other things. But he got a lot of things right. And one of the things he said is that objectivity does not mean standing mute between truth and falsity. And so often, when we read articles by people like Tom DeWall about the Armenian Genocide or about what's happened in Artsakh this week, that's exactly what they do. They look at the Turkish side, they look at the Armenian side, and they just say, well, there's just two different opinions. And we all know well that's not the case. A Truth Commission's function is to start with the truth and help the perpetrator society deal with it. To have the perpetrator society hear from Armenians about what happened. Hear from Armenians in Turkey today what it's like to be an Armenian in Turkey. What it's like to be discriminated against, to have people with posters at demonstrations calling for you to be killed, to have great leaders of yours assassinated in the street, and so forth. They need to hear what a struggle it is in the diaspora for people to keep an Armenian identity, to support this Armenian Republic that is very frail. And they need to hear from people in the Armenian Republic about the struggle to have a small, landlocked country facing hostile neighbors virtually all around. They need to hear about Armenian experiences and take them seriously. And so a Truth Commission of this type then leads to a reparative discussion, a discussion between Armenians, Turks, and others about what needs to be done now. Once Turkey can face the truth, once Turkish people face the truth, then we can start to talk about it. As you said, Armin, we can start to talk about this moral imperative in Turkey to do something. And maybe that will be the road to reparations. I just want to add one more thing, and this is my little contribution on dealing with the obstacles to reparations. And one of the issues, and I have to say this came from the Armenian community when I first started talking about these issues maybe 10 years ago. It certainly came from many very prominent scholars of genocide studies who are strong, strong supporters of Armenian genocide recognition, but who believed just as strongly that reparations were a non-issue and shouldn't be dealt with, that there was no issue of reparations. And certainly now comes from many Turkish sources and many other sources outside of the victim and perpetrator communities who really do not want to deal with the issues of reparations. The first, and there are a number of different arguments that we look at in the report, but there are four that I just want to share with you today. The first is that dialogue is the best way forward, and if Armenians call for reparations, if there are legal cases for reparations, if there are political statements that highlight the importance of reparations, that relations between Armenians and Turks will be damaged, and there will be a backlash of increased violence and hatred against Armenians, that Armenians will actually be worse off in the long run. Now, there are a lot of things that we say about this in the report, but the simplest thing I can say here picks up a point by Kabibi Tahembe, who's a representative of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, who has presented at Armenian events and has developed an affinity with the work that we're doing on reparations in relation to what she's doing on African American reparations. And she said that kind of logic is what she calls let sleeping dogs lie logic. It says that the victim group shouldn't say anything, shouldn't upset the perpetrator group, shouldn't challenge the perpetrator group for basic justice, because the perpetrator group will get angry and do the same kinds of things it did in the first place to the victim group. And the problem, she says, is if you get peace by letting sleeping dogs lie, all you're doing is you're leaving the same attitudes in place, the same hatreds, and the same power dynamic in place. Armenians will remain victims perpetually if we're afraid to raise these issues. Second is that too much time has passed. And we'll talk about a little bit later, time heals all wounds, that kind of idea. When it comes to genocide and other mass atrocities, it's the exact opposite. Time makes things worse. Groups that have experienced genocide, and I'll talk about this again in that second part, groups that have experienced genocide do not just have the effects during the genocide, but in the decades and even centuries after. As I said, I'll come back to this, but the point is, we are facing the legacy of the genocide today. It's not a past legacy. It's not something that ended in 1923 or 1917 or 18, whatever year you want to claim is the end of the genocide. It is something we are dealing with today, even more than right in the aftermath of the genocide. And if we don't deal with it, the consequences will be devastating for us. Not just in terms of abstract justice, but in terms of practical consequences. Another argument is that it's unfair to Turks today because they'll be hurt by reparations, but they don't have any connection to what actually happened. Setting aside the issue of Turkish people who engage in denial, the fact is Turkey benefits tremendously from the genocide. Wealthy Turkish families again and again are being shown by scholars like Umit Kurt, Uğur Ongor, Mehmet Palatel in Turkey, Turkish scholars, and outside of Turkey, but working on Turkish issues, to have generated their wealth through the genocide. And they enjoy that wealth. And as a little aside, I was in Ankara last year for a program honoring Hrant Dink. And we ended up doing a little tour. I went on this tour with a group of Turkish activists, people like Sayet Çetenoglu, who's just an amazing human being. And not only as we were driving around Turkey did they point out all the jails that they had been held in for this and that charge over their lives, but we ended up at Koch University, which, you know, Koch is the sort of Rockefeller of Turkey. And they have a branch in Ankara, and there are two main buildings. And it took us about an hour to get the guards there to admit it, but fortunately we had some smooth-talking, Turkish activists. And eventually they admitted that both of those structures, one was an Armenian house, and according to others there, very clearly an Armenian house. It's the architectural style that comes from Yerevan, actually. And so it's sort of copied from that. And the other was also an expropriated Armenian house. And so even today, universities benefit from the Armenian genocide, every aspect of Turkish life. And as Temel Demirer, another great Turkish activist on behalf of Armenians, has stated, the entire economy of the Turkish Republic starting in 1923 was based on the expropriated wealth of Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians. That's how fundamental what Armenians lost in the genocide is to Turkey today, and how much Turkey continues to benefit from it. Okay? And last is the idea that this is a pipe dream. And I'll say just two quick things about that. First is, it may be unrealistic to push for reparations. I'm not sure about that. I'm not saying that it is, but it may be. But even so, we need to push for reparations. Having that ethical issue on the table with Turkey and in front of the rest of the world shows that when Turkey treats Armenians badly, when they give arms or other support to Azerbaijan, that there is an unpaid legacy there, that they are adding to the harms that they've done, that there's a moral imperative that Turkey is refusing to honor in the way that certain other societies have chosen to honor their historical obligations. And at the very least, it becomes crucial for us to highlight this, to explain why Turkey is a problem for Armenia today, and it's not Armenia's fault, it's Turkey's fault. I'll add one other thing, and this is on the territorial return issue, and it's just a minor point, but it's something that's important about the report to us, is that as we were discussing things among the co-authors, we ended up with different ideas about possible ways of dealing with different issues: compensation, territorial return, the Truth and Reparations Commission, and so forth. And what we ended up deciding to do was to preserve the different options in the report, because we want the report to be at once a concrete proposal and at the same time a way for Armenians and others to work through the different options that are available in the context of contemporary political realities and legal realities, and to have the tools to negotiate in the future toward a real useful, meaningful reparations package. I won't go into this now because I think I'm pushing the time limit, but we have different ideas that came out, including number 2, which is Arababian's proposal, which actually I think is going to be a major 21st century contribution to global politics. Not to embarrass you, but I think this is true in the sense that he is operating with a post-nation state concept that respects minority groups and other peoples in a way that's tremendously innovative and that responds to the realities that we find ourselves after, compared to maybe the 19th century. And then there are other things we can talk about as well. This is something that I had come up with, which was to balance the needs of present-day Turks, and let's not forget there are a lot of poor people in Turkey, with the historical justice that Armenians are due. And in very simple terms, if we only look at contemporary issues in the aftermath of genocide, we're stuck with the fact that genocide has wiped out such a part of the population in the victim group that they don't figure as much as they should in any calculations of need, right? If there were 10 million or 20 million Armenians in the sort of Western Armenian and Eastern Armenian areas today, and we did a calculation on what they deserved in terms of land and so forth, that would be a very different calculation relative to maybe what would be 50 or 60 million Turks than it is when you have 3 million or even 2 million Armenians facing 70 million people in Turkey, if everyone can understand that. And so I came up with the idea that in order to balance current needs of Turks, and there are legitimate needs, we can't take everything, in reparations from Turkey because we don't want people to have horrible hardships. Average Turks have been victimized enough by their own government. But at the same time, there needs to be a recognition that Armenians deserve more than an equal share or an equal division of land because of the historical justice and because we're not just talking about the Armenians who are alive today, but we're talking about the Armenians who were killed as well. And they need to be figured in this process. All right, let me pass it on to my much more able co-author. And I appreciate so much your patience and indulgence. Hopefully this was helpful as a start.
Սրբազան հայրեր, մեծարգոներ կաներ, ինձ համար մեծ պատիվ է այս նույն դահլիճի մեջ առիթ ունենալու հանդիպել ձեզ, խոսելու, ներկայացնելու. I will be speaking in both languages, some Armenian, some English, in order everyone to understand. The presentation done mainly in English. Okay. And you can see it's called the Armenian Genocide Reparations Study Group Report and the Future of Turkish-Armenian Relationship. Because what we were doing, the main goal was to find some kind of solution. For me, the reparations were divided and are divided into 3 levels. Երեք մակարդակի վրա. The first level is individual or private, the second community or organized group, and the third national or state. Առաջինը այդ անհատականը, գիտեք, մենք 1000-ից ավել գործեր ունենք հաղթած, քչերը գիտեն դրա մասին, մարդիկ, որոնք Թուրքիայից ստացել են իրենց անհատական հարստությունը. For that process, you have to go to the court in Turkey, complete the process, and if you are refused in your rights, go to European Court of Human Rights. Through that process, it's too long, but it's possible to do, and it has done several times, over 1,000. The second level is community organized group. The most famous case is Սիսիկա թողիկության գործն այսօր, երբ որ այսինքն եկեղեցին որպես համայնքի ներկայացություն, որպես կազմակերպված խումբ փորձում է իր սեփականությունը ստանալ։ Գրեթե նույնն է այդ գործընթացը։ Այսինքն you have to go to the court, այնտեղ մի փոքր ավելի ուրիշ բաներ կա, իրավունքներն ավելի շատ են, because it's much easier for the church to prove that the property belongs to you. Because there are a lot of papers, a lot of so-called taboo, the deeds, թղթերը որոնք կան։ Ի տարբերություն առաջի խմբի մարդիկ, որոնք մեծ մասամբ չունեն, կամ կորցրել են, կամ չեն պահել, հասկանալի է։ Yes, I dealt mainly with national or state issue, which I think the most important part is, it's the territorial issue. այսինքն հողերի հարցը, տարածքների հարցը, որտեղ շատերը շփոթում են, երբ որ հող գսենք, հասկանան, ասենք եկեղեցու հողը կամ մարդու հողը։ Սրանք տարբեր բաներ են։ Այսինքն մարդը կարող է ունենալ սեփականություն, you can have a private property, real estate in the other state. But when we speak about a state property, it's who is the sovereign, whose title is on that territory. Because usually when we say this territory belongs to a country, this means that the title of that territory is Armenian. As usually you buy something, you change the title, the car, and so on. And to do this, we have to see what documents exist for now that deal with the border between the Republic of Armenia and Republic of Turkey, two modern states, successors of, let's say, Ottoman Empire and the First Armenian Republic. Between 1918 till 1923, 5 treaties were signed. And chronologically, the first one was Treaty of Sevres, signed on August 10, 1920. Then we have Alexandropol Treaty, signed on the 3rd of December 1920. Usually in the textbooks you will find 2nd of December, it's on the 3rd. And this is important, this small minor detail is very important for this case. Then it's come Moscow Treaty, Kars Treaty, and Lausanne Treaty. Usually, in a science, ցանկացած գիտության մեջ հասկանալու համար դու պիտի ունենաս այդ հիմնական ձևակերպումները ինչն են։ Միջազգային իրավունքի մեջ դուք ունեք շատ հստակ ձևակերպումներ, and usually this criteria in international law you can find in several sources. The most common are the conventions that states come together, they agree, they sign documents and fix the understanding of international norms there. And yeah, it's okay, it's in Armenian. And here you can see Article 2 of Vienna Convention, Treaty of Laws, which says that what is treaty? The understanding of treaty under international law. Treaty means an international agreement concluded between the states. Սա շատ կարևոր է, հիշեք, պետությունների միջև, between the states in written form and governed by international law. Մենք այստեղ տեսնում ենք, որ առնվազն երկու չափորոշիչ կա։ Պետությունների միջև պիտի ստորագրված լինի եւ պիտի միջազգային իրավունքի համապատասխան լինի, այսինքն ինքը շեղումներ պիտի չունենա։ Մենք նույն բանը այս կողքինը հայերեն տառերն է, բայց երևի այդ ֆոնտերը չկա, բանա, բայց it's okay, Ես մյուս ձևակերպումը էլի նույնն է։ There is a famous manual of United Nations, we can find the explanation almost the same, saying the subjects of international law has the right to sign international treaties. When we say international, this means interstate. Մի քիչ շփոթություն կա, քանի որ հայերենն էլ թարգմանել է։ Մենք երբ որ գսենք միջազգային, մեզ կթվա ազգերի միջև է այդ ամբողջը։ Միջազգային ասելով իրավունքը հասկանում է միջպետական պետությունների միջև, որտեղ nation state երբ որ ասում են, հասկանում են պետությունը կամ nationality, դա ազգությունը չի իրավունքի մեջ, դա քաղաքացիությունն է։ Այսինքն գրում է Լիբանիզ, չի գրում արաբ կամ հայ, այսինքն Canadian, հիմա ethnicity չկա այդ ծև, բայց մենք որ ազգություն ենք ասում, մի քիչ ուրիշ ենք հասկանում։ Հիմա սա ինչով է կարևոր, որտեղ մենք այս չափորոշիչներով պիտի մոտենանք հարցին։ We have to see that on the date of signing a treaty, the parties of the treaty, what status they have, legal status did they have at that time. Usually a document will be a legal one, it must be signed by a legal representative of a lawful government of a recognized state. Այսինքն երեք մակարդակի խնդիր կա այստեղ։ Այսինքն այդ մարդիկ պիտի ունենան լիազորություններ, լիազորված մարդիկ պիտի լինեն, օրինական կառավարության, սա էլ շատ կարևոր է, այսինքն կառավարությունը պիտի օրինական լինի, ամեն մարդ չի կրնասել այս կառավարել, եւ արդեն ճանաչված պետության։ Եթե դուք ուշադիր նայեք, այսօր էլ որ այդքան պայմանագրեր բաներ են ստորագրում, նույնն է, այսինքն ինչ են ասում արտակարգ եւ լիազոր դեսպան։ Այդտեղ սիրուն խոսք չի, պարզապես այդ մարդը լիազորված է արդեն պետության անունից, ինքը օրինական է եւ այդ լիազորությունները ճանաչված են։ You have a letter of credential, այսինքն հավաստակիրը, you go when you are ambassador until the head of the state did not take from you the letter and saying, okay, you are accepted, you are an ambassador, you have no right. Դա կախված չի քո իշխանությունը քեզ ինչ իրավունք է տալիս։ Դա կախված է դիմացինը ճանաչում է այդ իրավունքը թե չէ։ Հետևաբար, երբ որ մենք այդ չափորոշիչներով նայում ենք, Treaty of Sevres, who were the parts of this treaty? From one side, it was the Ottoman Empire, the legal, lawful government of the Ottoman Empire. At that time, Wahiddin Muhammad VI, the Sultan. Regardless, did he control the territory of Ottoman Empire or small part, it doesn't matter. Որտեվ շատերը ասում են, դե գիտեք ինչ կա, Սուլթանը Ստամբուլի մեջ էր նստած, անատոլյան քեմալականների ցերն են, կապ չունի։ Կապ չունի դա, մենք բազմաթիվ դեպքեր գիտենք, այսօր Ասադն էլ Սիրիայի 20%-ն է վերահսկում, 17%-ը տարածքով, բայց Ասադը մնում է ճանաչված օրինական իշխանությունը Սիրիայի։ Աֆղանստանի մեջ Գուլբեդինի իշխանությունը, the government was recognized by everyone, and when the Taliban occupied Kabul and 98% of the country, nevertheless, Gulbuddin was the official lawful head of the state. From that standpoint, we see that Treaty of Sevres, it's a legal, lawful document signed by the sides that have that authority. Հիմա չի վավերացվել է, այդ ուրիշ հարց է, մենք դրա մասին առանձին կխոսանք, որտեղ Սևրի մասին պիտի խոսանք։ Մյուս կողմը 18 երկիր էին։ 18 երկիր։ Տեսեք, կապ չունի, որ 18 հատ են շատ, որտեղ շատերին թվում է, որ շատ են, ասում են բազմակողմ, այդպես չի։ Մի կողմը կարող է բաղկացած լինի շատ երկրներից։ Հիմա այս Սևրի պայմանագիրը ինչով է կարևոր նաև, որ Հայաստանը մաս է կազմել։ Armenia was among the countries, among the victorious countries, and has the right to sign. It's շատ կարևոր մանրամասն է, which means the Paris Peace Conference recognized the right of Armenia, not Armenians. It's շատ կարևոր է, այսինքն պետությունը նման իրավունքի արժանացավ, այսինքն Հայաստանը որպես պետություն թույլ տվեցին, որ կա ստորագրի, ինչու, որտեղ 20 թվականի օգոստոսն էր Հայաստանը անկախությունը, the Armenian independence actually was recognized on January 19, 1920. We usually speak about 1918, about May, about Sartarapատ, անկախության հռչակում եւ այլն, մայիսի 28, but we do not realize that actually Armenia became a subject of international law from January 1920. And why everybody, I mean, the three main powers on behalf of League of Nations recognized the Armenian statehood at that time, British Empire, France and Italy, acting on behalf of everyone. Ինչի ճանաչեցին։ Շատ պարզ պատճառով դուք պիտի ճանաչեք մեկին, որպեսզի հետը կարողանաք պայմանագիր ստորագրեք։ Երբ որ Սերժ Սարգսյանը հիմա ասում է մենք Ղարաբաղի հետ կնքենք ռազմական փոխօգնության պայմանագիր, առաջի բաներից մեկը, որ ես ասեցի իր խորհրդականներին ցանկի, ասի դուք չեք կարող։ Դուք առաջինը պիտի ճանաչեք Ղարաբաղի անկախությունը, նոր կնքեք։ Ինչպես օրինակ այստեղ չէ, օրինակ ընկերությունը, a company or NGO, you have to first be recognized by state. A status must be given to you and then you can act or sign. Նոր կարող ես հաշիվ բացել եւ այլն։ Պետությունների միջև այդպես է։ Եվ another important thing that Armenia was recognized by the United States on the 23rd of April 1920. Այս էլ շատ կարևոր հարց է։ Ամերիկացիներն ինչու ճանաչեցին։ Հենց ճանաչեցին այն ժամանակ, որ քննարկվում էր Հայաստանի սահմանների հարցը։ Ինչու, որպեսզի իրավունք ունենան մասնակցելու եւ որոշելու։ Ինչը մենք կտեսնենք, ինչը որոշեցին։ Հիմա չխորանալով մանրամասների մեջ, Ալեքսանդրապոլի պայմանագիր, ինչու ես ասեցի երեքին, շատ կարևոր է։ Because you know that Armenia 11th Red Army forced Armenian government to resign at 6 o'clock p.m. on December 2nd. It's an important detail. And the treaty was signed after 6 hours of the resignation, which means that the delegation had no authority to sign an international document. And from the other side was not Turkey. If you read, let's say, all these treaties, Alexandropol, Moscow, Kars, it's written the government of the great Mejlis of Turkey, not the government of Turkey. Turkey meets Azgain Joghovi եւ այլն. See, it's the name of NGO. Everybody now, who was Atatürk at that time? He created an NGO, non-governmental organization, which was called Rumeliayum Shahiri Pashpanutyan Committee, a defense committee for rights in Rumelia, then a defense committee for rights in Anatolia, and so on. Then it was renamed as the big Mejlis of big parliament of Turkey. But the name does not give any status to any organization. It was. Այդ ժամանակ էլ դա էր։ Ուրեմն մենք տեսնում ենք Ալեքսանդրոպոլի պայմանագրի ժամանակ հայկական կողմը արդեն չուներ իշխանություն, թուրքական կողմը դեռևս չուներ իշխանություն։ Շատ կարևոր է։ Ինչ ենք այս պայմանագրերին մենք անդրադառնում, որովհետև երբ որ մենք վաղը գնանք դատարան եւ մեր այս հողերի հարցը տնենք, թուրքերը մեզ պիտի մի բան ասեն դե դուք հրաժարվել եք, արդեն ստորագրել եք, հրաժարվել եք։ Այստեղ շատ կարևոր է, որ այս ամբողջությունն որ ասել չէ, գիտեք, այդ հրաժարումը չի եղել օրինական եւ թուրքերն իմացել են։ Պահպանված հերագրեր կան, որ ասենք Ղարաբեգի շնորհավորական հերակիր է ուղարկե Օրջանոգիձեին, այդ ռուս կոմունիստների ղեկավարներից մեկին շնորհավորելով իշխանափոխությունն արդեն, մինչև այս ստորագրելը, այսինքն եւ բոլշևիկները եւ քեմալականները լավ էլ իմացել են, որ Հայաստանում չի եղել արդեն իշխանություն։ Այսինքն դա պարզապես միջազգային իրավունքի տեսանկյունից եղել է օկուպացիա, occupation, այսինքն եկել գրավել են։ Հա, նույնը վերաբերում է Մոսկվային, այս տարի Մոսկվայի պայմանագրի մասին շատ խոսակցություն եղավ, if you remember, two members of communist caucuses from Russian Duma, they came with an initiative about Moscow Treaty to nullify the treaty and so on, which did not happen actually. Foreign Ministry said that it will not nullify or cancel that treaty, and actually it's very, let's say, unlawful treaty in terms that not only the parties had no right to sign an international treaty because they were not recognized and lawful governments of their states. Ոչ բոլշևիկները, ոչ քեմալականները չէին, անկախ նրանից, որ բոլշևիկները գրավել էին Մոսկվան կամ Պետերբուրգը. Yesterday we were speaking about Hoover Center Institute here. Քչերը գիտեն, որ օրինակ the Russian embassy here in Washington, the United States, existed until 1933. I mean, Ambassador Bakhmetyev was the representative of, it was called temporary government of Russia. Ռուսաստանի ժամանակավոր կառավարությունն էր, որ ցարից հետո կար։ Հայաստանի դեսպանատունն էլ է գործել Վաշինգտոնում մինչև 1933 թվականի նոյեմբերը։ Մենք էլ ենք մոռացել, որ մեր Ամերիկանի Միացյալ Նահանգները շարունակում էր ճանաչել Հայաստանի անկախ պետությունը մինչև 1933 թվականը։ Մենակ այն բանից հետո, երբ որ 33 թվականի հունվարին Հիտլերը եկավ իշխանության Գերմանիայի մեջ, ճանաչեցին սովետական միությունը, որ նշանակում է նաև Հայաստանի անեքսիան, որովհետև պետք ունեին սովետական միության ռազմական աջակցության։ Այսինքն Մոսկվայի ժամանակ էլ անօրինական էր։ But here with Moscow Treaty we have another illegality that two let's say parties were dealing with the borders of a recognized country, Armenia, and the lands of Armenian territories were given to the fourth party, to Azerbaijan. By, let's say, Article 3, Nakhichevan was given to Azerbaijan and so on. And also, let's say, Bolsheviks, they gave to Turkey Surmalui Գավառը, which was always was part of Yerevan province, Երևանի նահանգի մաս էր, այդ Մասի Սարը, Սուրմալուն եւ այլն։ Ինչի they just exchanged with Batumi, because Batumi was, according to the first agreement, part of Georgia, because the understanding was that they have to return to the borders of 1878 before that Berlin Treaty. But then Stalin took the negotiations in his hands, and they exchanged Ararat with Batumi, because Batumi was very important for Bolsheviks. It's not the case that Stalin was, let's say, Georgian. Just, let's say, for Bolsheviks, seaport was more important than if they think a stupid mountain, something snow and stone, nothing important there. Who cares about a mountain? So it happened. Actually, this is the first, let's say, Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact treaty. You know that Stalin Russia and Nazi Germany, they signed between Ribbentrop a treaty. They divided the lands of the third and fourth countries. And Russia recognized that it was illegal to do so. But this situation was 20 years before that pact. And we have a Treaty of Kars, almost the same situation. From one side, Armenian Bolsheviks, from the other side, Kemalists and so on, which actually ratified the situation which was created by Treaty of Moscow. It's identical to both treaties. But Turks, Kemalists forced to sign this. And Treaty of Lausanne, the last one, and so on. Okay, I will speak a little bit on Treaty of Lausanne later, saying that usually in Armenian textbooks, other books, you can find a notion that the Lausanne Treaty had cancelled, severed the rights. Nothing so. You cannot find anything and even mention the Treaty of Sever or the name of Sever in Lausanne treaties. We have, by Article 16, Kemalists, they reconfirmed the rights of Armenia over Wilsonian Armenia, not mentioning the name. I will show that article. Okay, what we have 5 treaties, 4 of them are illegal, and they do not define the border between Armenia and Turkey. Հիմա դրանք չեն որոշում, որն էր որոշում, այսինքն եթե այդ պայմանագրերը չեն։ Այսինքն մենք գնում ենք այսպես բացասման օրենքով, we're rejecting this and what will remain on the table. Մենք ունենք այս փաստաթուղթը. Decision of the President of the United States between access to the sea and demilitarization. Here, with this title, you can see that there are 3 goals: giving territories to Armenia, giving access to sea, and demilitarization, because without demilitarization, it was impossible to. Okay. The details you can find, Armen already said, there are some books there. This, in the central blue one, is the complete decision of the arbitral award, 256 pages with 28 maps, very detailed. It's very important, maybe the most important document regarding Armenian territorial rights. And these red books, they are articles, some kind of commentary, մեկնաբանություններն են ավելի շատ մանրամասն, ինչի մասին, ինչ որ ես խոսում եմ, դրա շատ ավելի մանրամասները կա։ Հիմա we need to understand a little bit the background, how it happened. Այսինքն, ես ասեցի 18-ից 23 թվական, 18 թվականին ուրեմն ինչ եղավ, հիշենք 18 թվականի հոկտեմբերին Օսմանյան կայսրությունը պարտվեց, հունվարին Փարիզում հավաքվեցին 52-ից ավելի երկրներ եւ սկսեցին քնել աշխարհի ճակատագիրը։ Պարտված 4 երկրներ հիշեք, Գերմանիան էր, Ավստրո-Հունգարիան, Բուլղարիան եւ Թուրքիան։ Այս 4 երկրի կամ Օսմանյան կայսրությունը ճակատագիրն էին քննարկում, so-called New World Order։ Այդ բառերը այն ժամանակվանից գալիս է։ The first they dealt with Versailles Treaty, this is Germany, fate of Germany, to Austro-Hungarian, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and to do so they created so-called Big Four, the heads of big countries. Here from right to left you can see Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, George Clemenceau, President of France, David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of the British Empire, and Eduardo Orlando, head of Italian government. These 4 countries were the main decision makers at that time, because you understand that with over 50 people and countries, very hard to come to a final decision. But an important detail, what they were doing on behalf of the conference, of everyone, which means the decision taken by these 4 is equal to the decision taken by all members of the conference. The authority was given to them to do so. So, they began dealing with Ottoman fate. Օսմանյան կայսրության ճակատագրին սկսեցին անդրադառնալ մենակ 20 թվականին արդեն, երբ որ մյուսները վերջացրեցին, 20 թվականի փետրվարին նախ Լոնդոնի մեջ, ապա ապրիլին Սան Ռեմոյի մեջ հավաքվեցին, որոշեցին ինչ պիտի անեն Օսմանյան կայսրության հետ եւ շատ կարեւոր որոշումներ կայացրեցին։ Հիմա շատերը այսօր որ դες լավ հայտնի է, ասենք միջին արևելքի վիճակը, չգիտեն կամ չեն պատկերացնում, որ այդ ինչ որ այսօր կա, Լիբանան, Սիրիա, Իրաք եւ այլն, այս ժամանակ է ստեղծվել եւ հայերի հետ միասին, որտեղ միշտ չեն նշում հայերանը. When they speak about mandated territories, they speak that Syria was given to France, Palestine, Jordan was given to British Empire, but nobody mentions that Armenia was given to the United States. Because Armenia actually was first, when it was the first Sykes-Picot Agreement from 1916, at that time it was decided it will be part of Russian Empire, but because Russia collapsed as a statehood, it was in turmoil with this Bolshevik revolt, they decided Armenia will be an independent state. Դա շատ կարևոր հարց է, որտեղ երբ որ մենք խոսում ենք, շատ մանրամասներին ուշադրություն չենք դարձնում, իսկ դիվանագիտության մեջ շատ կարևոր է։ Ուրեմն 20 թվականի փետրվարին որոշվեց Հայաստանը պիտի լինի անկախ երկիր, որտեղ միջև այդ քննարկումներ կար, արդյոք պիտի ճանաչեն, չպիտի ճանաչեն, սա մեկ։ Երկրորդ որոշումը, պիտի լինի մեկ միասնական Հայաստան։ Երբ որ մենք խոսում ենք արևմտյան արևելյան Հայաստանների մասին եւ նրանց իրավական տեսակետից չկա տենց բան։ Պիտի լինի մեկ միասնական Հայաստան, ճանաչված Հայաստանի Հանրապետությանը, պիտի միացվեն նախկին Օսմանյան կայսրության նահանգներ՝ Վան, Բիթլիս, Էրզրում եւ Տրապիզոն։ Վերջնական որոշումը ինչ մասով պիտի միացվեն, Ուիլսոնը պիտի առնի։ Այսինքն սա շատ կարևոր է։ This shows that the rights of Armenian statehood over Van, Bitlis, Erzurum, and Trapizon already were recognized in London First Conference 1920. And in April, in Italy, they sent an official letter signed by Nitti, at that time Prime Minister of Italy, and they sent to Woodrow Wilson with 2 main requests. The first, to assume a mandate over Armenia. The second one, to take an arbitral decision on the border between Armenia and Turkey. The first, which is the mandate, was rejected by Congress of the United States on June 1st, 1920. And Wilson knew that actually nobody will vote in favor of Armenian mandate. Why he had done in this way? Mr. Richard Hovhannisyan spoke in Yerevan University, said that because Wilson wanted to show himself as friend of Armenians, and so I do not agree. I have written an article, sent him as well. Wilson դրա կարիքը չուներ։ Wilson արդեն ստացել էր Նոբելյան մրցանակ։ Հիշենք Wilson այսինքն երկրորդ ամերիկյան նախագահն էր Թեոդոր Ռուզվելտից հետո, որ խաղաղության Նոբելյան մրցանակ էր ստացել, երրորդը դե գիտեք Օբաման է, եւ միակներ, որ PhD ուներ in law, այսինքն բավականին խելոք մարդ էր եւ ինչ անում էր, հասկանում էր։ At that time ինքը դեմոկրատ էր, բանի մեծ մասը, կոնգրեսի մեծ մասը, սենատը, because you know, according to your constitution, Senate must give a consent with 2/3 of the votes. Ինքը գիտեր, որ դա բան չի լինի, չի ստանա, ինչի մտավ խորհրդարան, շատ բարձ պատճառով։ Եթե Միացյալ Նահանգների Սենատը վերցրեց այդ հարցը քննության, դա նշանակում է ինքը ճանաչեց, որ այլևս թուրքական իշխանություն այդ հողի վրա չկա, որովհետև Ազգերի լիգայի 22-րդ հոդվածն ասում է, որ նախկին Օսմանյան կայսրության տարածքների վրա պիտի ստեղծվի Միացյալ Նահանգների մանդատ։ Այսինքն մենք ունենք նաև we have today the consent of your Senate saying that it's not Turkish territory, որտեղ ինքը վերցրել է, ինքը քննարկել է, բայց ասել է հա, թուրքական չի, բայց ես չեմ ուզում։ Հիմա ինչի չէր ուզում այդ ուրիշ պատճառներ այնտեղ, փողի խնդիր էր, հազար ու մի հարց կար, բայց դա մերժեց։ Հետո շատ կարևոր է, we have to understand that these questions are separate. Իրանք միասնական չեն, because some people think in Armenia that okay, Wilson rejected the mandate, which means he rejected also arbitration and so on. No. There are two separate questions. You can find in that book that in blue big one, even Nitti mentions that there are two separate issues. Մանդատը մերժվեց, գնաց եւ այլն հասկանալի է։ Իսկ երկրորդ հարցը, which means the decision, arbitral decision, the consent, the agreement to become as an arbitrator was sent officially to a Paris Peace Conference, the answer on 17 of May 1920, which means 2 weeks before the discussion in Senate and over 2 months before signing the Treaty of Sevres. These are two, the treaty and the arbitration, they deal with the same issue, but there are two different separate processes going in parallel with each other. And does not mean that the outcome of one process had nothing to do with the outcome of the second one. Այս երկու հարցերն էր. Here you can see the letter. I have all these documents saying that I have published in that book. I found all these documents in National Archives in Washington. It's called NARA, National Archive of NARA, registration something, I don't know. Yeah. Here, this is the letter that, all the papers, the letters are kept. We can easily prove that it was done even before that. And at the beginning of June, a special committee was created by the United States, headed by president of Wisconsin, one of the professors from Wisconsin University, William Westermann. And also members, representatives from State Department, War Department, at that time it was called the War Department, now it's Defense Department, and the President administration were included in this committee. And this committee prepared that decision that it's a decision 89 pages with 150-something appendices to the decision and all the maps. Here you can see the first 2 pages of the arbitral award. It is signed and sealed. It is signed by President of the United States, by Bainbridge Colby, State Secretary, and sealed, as Armand already mentioned, with the Great Seal of the United States. Each year United States signs maybe thousands and thousands international documents. Only few of them are sealed with the Great Seal of the United States, because with this signature, both, let's say, President and State Secretary, and with seal, this comes the law of the land. This document is equal to US Constitution. It's law of the land. Why actually Wilson did so? Because he understood it was on the 22nd of November 1920. It was clear Armenian army was defeated in Kars. The Turks took Kars on October 30, 1920, and this was done after 3 weeks. That it is impossible to implement the documents, this document, during his life or his presidency. Ինքը արեց մի բան, որ իր իշխանությունից հետո էլ այս փաստաթուղթը մնա օրինական եւ ուժի մեջ։ Սա շատ կարեւոր հարց է։ Այսինքն ցանկացած ամերիկացի, այն ինչ որ ժամանակին Վահան Քարտաշյանն էր ուզում, կարա դիմի ցանկացած դատարան, դատ բացի պետքարտուղարության դեմ, որ այն հիմնական պահանջը, որ պետքարտուղարությունը չի կատարում երկրի օրենքը։ Այսինքն նա ոչ մի քայլ չի իրականացնում երկրի հիմնական օրենքը, ինչպես ասենք amendment to constitution so on։ Եվ ժամանակին այդ փորձերը արվել է, բայց այսպես կիսատ ամնացավ, որտեղ Վահան Քարտաշյանը մահացավ, հետո պայքարը մի քիչ շեղվեց այլ ուղղության արդեն։ Հետո հիշենք այն թվերին չկար Հայաստան եւ այդ հարցը միշտ կար, whom the land must be given։ Այդ հարցին մենք էլի կանդրադառնանք, որտեղ այստեղ էս հարցը եղավ, այսինքն who is or to whom it must be given, Հայաստանի Հանրապետություն, թե Սփյուռք եւ այլն։ Հիմա այդ հարցին միանգամից պատասխանեմ, հետո, իմիջիալոց սա հենց օրիգինալն է։ This is the original document of that. You can see is this legal size papers, blue one with the seal and so on. When I took the document, they have no data for, they kept data for 50 years, and during 50 years, nobody has claimed the document. Before that, nobody knows. Ամեն դեպքում այս փաստաթուղթն է, շատ հետաքրքիր։ Here you can see, it's the seal. On site, on the paper, and you just glue on that. This is the map attached to that. All these maps are included in the book. And according to this decision, the award, this part, the main parts of Van, Bitlis, Erzum, and Trapizon Treaty villages have Armenian title. Ավելի ճիշտ Հայաստանի Հանրապետության of the title of the Republic of Armenia. Ասում ենք Armenian թվմապանա. Because all decisions, arbitral awards are final and binding, a special map was made by War Department, it's called demarcation. I think to mark with special pillars and so on. This you can see ավելի մեծ ասած դեպի հյուսիս տրապիզոնից արևմուտքն է, այս հայ-թուրքական սահմանն է եւ այլն։ Հիմա մի երկու խոսք ասեմ ու վերջացնենք մնացածը հարցերով։ About Treaty of Sevres. Նայեք, պայմանագրերը ոնց են։ Պայմանագրերը ընդհանրապես usually they enter into so-called into force with ratification. But in treaties you have some exceptions saying that these articles may enter into, let's say, after a month or two or without ratification and so on. Սևրի պայմանագիրը այո վավերացված չի։ Այդ ուրիշ հարց, որ Սևրի պայմանագիրը առանց վավերացման ինքը բան է, it's a binding document, առանց վավերացման, որովհետև պայմանագրերը, որոնք կնքված են so-called between contracting parties, դա որպես կոնտրակտ է անցալվում, այսինքն դա վավերացման կարիք չունի։ Դա երկրորդ հոդվածն է Վիեննայի կոնվենցիայի, այսինքն ինքը is binding without ratification։ Բայց հիմա տնենք մի կողմ այդ ratification-ի հարցը, խնդիրը շատ պարզ է, որ պայմանագիրը չի վավերացվել, բայց երկու հոդված, 89-րդ եւ 90-րդ հոդվածները ասում է to accept the decision thereupon, which means the decision, the arbitration պիտի ընդունվեր բան միանգամից, այսինքն without ratification, which means after it was done, sealed and signed, it became a binding document. Because Turks always say what means that thereupon, Article 90 says that from the date of the decision, տեսեք այստեղ գրված չի, որ after ratification or after entering into force of the treaty, from the date of ratification, the decision, which means 22nd of November, Turkey, the main thing is the title and rights, gives the title and rights to Armenia. There are 4 international criteria for any arbitration. We know with all these things. Yeah, it's for now. Yeah, so much for now, and then we go on. Which means that what we have now, we have this part as the part, legal part, de jure part of the Republic of Armenia, which is occupied by another country. Ոնց որ հյուսիսային Կիպրոսն է։ Ես որ Հայաստան խոսում եմ, ասում են դե դա վաղուց էր։ Դա Կիպրոսը գրավել են, չէ՞ թուրքերը։ Բայց այդ չդարավ որ Թուրքիա, դա Կիպրոսի հողն է, տարածքն է օրինական, որտեվ թուղթը պատկանում է, այսպես Կիպրոսին Թուրքիա, նույնն էլ սա է։ Այս հողը մերն է։ Սա ոչ ոք չեղյալ չի հայտարարել, եկեք գրավել են թուրքերը, բան չունենք, այդ ուրիշ հարց է։ Կարանք հետ վերցնենք, չեն կարա, այդ ուրիշ հարց է։ Բայց կա փաստաթուղթ, որով այս հողերը մերն է։ Թող աշխարհը նախ էս ճանաչի, այսինքն որ իրանք մեզանից գրավել են, հետո մենք արդեն ոնց որ ասած կբանակցենք լուծման տարբեր ձևեր կա. Henry already mentioned that we have some proposals how to find a solution, a mutually acceptable solution for Armenians, Kurds and Turks. It's possible, but first let them recognize that these are this is a part of the Republic of Armenia. Legally, it's a part. As legally, let's say Karabakh and others are part of Republic of Armenia, but it's another issue. Maybe we'll speak on this. Thank you.
We're going to invite, before the questions and answers, we are going to invite Professor Thériault back for about 10 minutes. But as we just heard, and as the lawyers in the audience will especially appreciate, when we walk into court, especially into a settlement conference, or if we go to private mediation and we're trying to have an informal resolution of a matter, the plaintiff or the claimant's attorney often comes in with what? An astronomical demand that has no connection to the reality at all. But the more one listens to Ambassador Babyan, we see that this maximalist approach may be really the mainstream avenue that all of us should consider. So that maximalism does not mean overly ambitious. Maximalist does not mean something that we ultimately won't be able to obtain. But maximalist may mean this is reasonable, this is sober, this is substantiated by facts and precedent. Now, other than disagreeing with my father, which I'm going to punish you for the rest of our religion. No, I'm kidding about that. But here is the hook. There's the theory. It sounds good. It looks good. We walk out of there thinking that these lands are ours. And we have a leader here who is showing us the way to do it. But how do we link that to the reality? What court are we going to go to? Where are we going to enforce our rights? Can I do it? No. Can Ambassador Babyan do it? No. We're going to find out in the afternoon who can do that and how we can help in that effort. So we're going to conclude with a lunch in about 15 minutes. Professor Thériault is going to come and sum up this morning. Please.
I'm going to try to be a little bit quicker than anticipated just because I know we're a little behind schedule. Can everyone hear me or should I use the microphone? Microphone? Okay, sorry. I know I kept fading away from it, so maybe I'll pull it off. That way I can move a little bit. I just want to try to bring forward the reparations discussion to today. I mean, to this month of 2016. Is it okay? Okay, yeah. Okay, I won't move too much and I won't throw it around. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. And as I said before, we tend to forget just how much of an impact the genocide has on the day-to-day existence of Armenians in every sort of part of our existence today and every place that we're existing. And I want to start by saying that if you look at the history of genocide, that most of the time, groups that have experienced genocide eventually become very, very, very vulnerable and weak or go out of existence. That's the norm. We see the Holocaust and we see a relatively vibrant Israel. We see, militarily, I don't know if it's secure, but at least militarily very capable of self-defense and so forth. And we forget that the reason why Jews as a group and as the majority of a state have the kind of power, identity, viability, and security that they have today is because there were significant reparative processes after the Holocaust, and that on top of that, there was a commitment globally to make sure that Germany, didn't continue its efforts against Jews, and also that Jews had international support for their identity, for their peoplehood, and for their state. Okay, that's the exception. If we start mentioning names like, you know these names, some of them, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Taino in Puerto Rico. If we talk about the Herero, who are still around, but in a very minor way. If we talk about Tasmanians, who are all but wiped out, there is a small Tasmanian community that exists in Australia still. And on, we find out that the reality of genocide is it may not work right at the moment that the direct killing ends. A lot of times there are big survivor communities, but over time, the effects of genocide play out to erase the groups that have experienced it. And Armenians, given the lack of support we've had externally, geopolitically, and in other ways, have probably had one of the best histories of resisting that long-term destruction of most any group, but we're still facing it. The impacts of the genocide are, we talk about astronomical demands. That's balanced by the fact that the impacts are astronomical. And I'm going to go back to Richard Hovannessian and in a very nice way here. In 1991, he gave a talk, and I was at the ARS Summer Studies program up at Amherst College, and sort of learning about a lot of these issues for the first time. He gave a great talk on sort of the contemporary history of Armenians. And one of the things he said was that even had the genocide happened through 1918, but the Armenian Republic had been left to exist the way that it was envisioned, that today, this is 1991, he estimated that the Armenian Republic would have 18 million Armenians in it. Think about that difference. And if we go forward now, we're another 25 years, even more. We're talking about a country significantly larger, but also than the Armenian Republic, but also with a population of 20 million. That's Iraq, that's Syria, that's a regional power. And if you think about what the difference that would make in terms of Armenians' relationship with Turkey, don't forget, more Armenians would have repatriated from Turkey, more hidden Armenians would have come forward in the century that we've had since the genocide. But more importantly, Armenia would be a very different situation for Turkey. Turkey couldn't bully Armenia, couldn't blockade the border. Armenia would have a sea access, okay? And Azerbaijan would be a third the size of Armenia, right? This is a huge shift geopolitically. In terms of identity security, you would have a huge state that everybody in the world would know the same way they know Iraq or other regional powers. You would have a state that could enforce its legal claims. You would have a state that could protect Armenians outside of the Republic, okay, particularly in Artsakh today. And you would have a state that would be the center, the glue of an Armenian identity around the world, right? Another impact of the genocide is, you look around, we have this beautiful Armenian Catholic Church. We have this incredible community in Los Angeles. We have all these organizations coming together. Think about, for those of you who are involved, and I suspect it's most of, if not all of you, and we have the Courier here, right? I mean, important Armenian media that we have. Think about how much effort each one of us puts into those activities per capita. How much of our time, our money, our efforts, our emotional energy goes into not even preserving, but at least keeping as much as we can an Armenian heritage and an Armenian political presence in the world, an Armenian identity, and so forth. It's an incredible amount. It's the kind of effort that Turkey doesn't need to make, that France doesn't need to make, Japan doesn't need to make, the United States. It just happens for big countries, powerful countries, that have not experienced what genocide victims have experienced. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Armenians. As I said before, if you compare us to many other victim groups, we've done comparatively well, but that's because of the incredible effort that it's taken, right? So much of our efforts go into that and not other kinds of things that they could be going into. Push this a little bit more. I mentioned the economy of Turkey being based on the wealth of Armenians. Does the Armenian Republic today have a strong, internationally powerful economy? No one would say that, right? Why is the Armenian Republic poor? Part of it is the land loss, right? The territory of Armenia is a very difficult territory to make viable for a country. That's part of why Artsakh is so important. We know that. And that's also very much why lands in Western Armenia are so important to Armenia. okay, just in terms of being able to feed itself, okay. Armenia is poor in large part because of that incredible expropriation of wealth from Armenians. The Armenian Republic in 1918 to 1920 was accepting refugees, absolutely poor, traumatized refugees from Western Armenia. And that has shaped economically the future, what Armenia faces today and what Armenians around the world have faced. Think about also why Armenia ended up in the Soviet Union and what that meant for Armenians. There were some benefits, don't get me wrong, but a lot of Armenians were killed during the Stalinist period. Okay, there was a lot of political repression, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but also the political climate and culture of Armenia today is more than anything else a legacy of the Soviet era, right? What are the two hallmarks? Not the best, I mean, better than the region, other countries in the region, but much weaker than we would like political democratic institutions and attitudes, and also corruption, right? Hallmarks of the Soviet system. What a difference we would see in Armenia today politically if we had this legacy back to 1918, if reparations had been made and kept at that period. Okay? I would go so far, and I say this with Ara Papian and Raphael Vanessian here, can you imagine having those two in high leadership positions this week in Armenia, or over the past 10 years in Armenia, and what that could mean? Okay? And we have lost some of that because of the political climate in Armenia. Okay? Think about what Syrian Armenians are going through right now. If Armenia were a regional power of 20 million, if there was this wealth, this identity coherence and so forth, Armenians would not be a vulnerable minority in a hostile environment, but would be in a very different position. Many Armenians would be in Armenia anyway, but even those who were in Syria or in Beirut in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s would not have had to run away from their country, would not have been as vulnerable. Okay? What it means to be a genocide victim group is more than anything else to be vulnerable. And we see the impact, right? Communities of Armenians that are hundreds or even thousands of years old in these areas are now being wiped out by ISIS and other forces, and have been for some time. We understand now that the legacy of genocide is this vulnerability that plays out over time. And so what I want to argue is reparations are absolutely justified in an abstract justice sense, and we talk about that in the report. But they're also justified by need. The purpose of reparations after a genocide is to ensure that the victim group survives in a meaningful way. That's why there are reparations. And every victim group deserves this. That's why I support Native American reparations in the US. Different tribes deserve. People on the Pine Ridge Reservation do not deserve an adult, average male age of death of 56 in the United States, which is a direct legacy of genocide. Native Americans all around the United States do not deserve the kind of poverty that they face, which is almost incomprehensible in the bigger society. We never see it. It's never presented to the majority society in very much the same way that many Armenian issues are hidden from worldview. Okay? They don't deserve it any more than Armenians deserve the legacy of genocide. Reparations are about helping the victims survive, and without reparations, victim groups generally do not survive over the long term. And I'll be a bit pessimistic. I'm all, supportive of Armenian causes and believe very strongly in the way that Armenians survive and thrive in the worst of circumstances. And there will be an Armenian people in 100 years or so, I believe, strongly. However, there's also a reality check. Without reparations, that mean not just the material resources to support Armenians in the Republic, in Artsakh and in other places, but also the change in attitudes by Turkey, the forced, the international opinion against Azerbaijani aggression. I just want to put an aside here. Because of the Holocaust, it is inconceivable that Germany would give weapons or support to Iran to use against Israel. It's inconceivable. Yet Turkey can do that with Azerbaijan against Armenians with impunity. That would stop with a proper reparative process. It would stop inside Turkey, and the international community would not accept it. These are the kinds of things that are at stake. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I really believe that without a serious reparative process, Artsakh may be gone in 10 years. The Republic may be gone in 50 years. We should keep in mind emigration from the Republic, which is a huge problem. Why do people emigrate? They emigrate because of economic reality, right? We can add into that the trafficking of women and girls in the Republic, which is significant, and other kinds of issues that are coming out of the economic deprivation of Armenians that is reducing the Armenian population, that is causing Armenians to suffer, okay? This is a legacy of genocide, and it's the result of a long process of genocide. If we had reparations, we would have the basis to build the Republic in a very different way from the struggles that it faces today. And so the Republic itself may not exist, at least in any meaningful sense, in 50 years. Diasporan communities, and I'm a great example of this, struggle so much to maintain identity, but anyone who works with younger groups knows that it's an incredible struggle, that we're losing a sense of Armenian identity and commitment to Armenians, to other Armenians around the world. There's always a core group that's there, but we're losing it. And I hesitate to even mention Turkey. With renewed anti-Armenian attitudes that have met a sort of renaissance of Armenians in Turkey in the past 2 decades, we are seeing violence, we are seeing genocidal rhetoric against Armenians, we're seeing a transformation that is not just affecting Armenians, but other minorities as well. This little moment in Turkish history where things seem to open up for the Kurds, for Armenians, for other minorities, seems to be fading very quickly if we look at the treatment of the Kurds now in eastern Turkey. And it's very possible that through forced emigration, forced assimilation, and even murder, that the Armenian community in Turkey will be gone. We know what's happening to our churches there. We know what's happening to other aspects of Armenian history that are in Turkey being slowly destroyed. So I want to leave you with the point that reparations are not just abstractly just, but we do need them. This is not a pie-in-the-sky idea. This is an issue of survival, and it's an issue of our right to survival. That's what reparations mean. So thank you very much for your time.
So I think you share with me my feeling that the ease and fluency of the speakers, not only in the subject matter, but in their communication skills, left us very full of information and motivation. I want to thank each one of you for being here, being the bookends, and also the girth and the substance of what we had to present. We have about 5 minutes for a handful of questions, not even a handful, for a couple questions or comments. And let's keep them short, and the answers are short as well. And for those who cannot hear the question, I will repeat it.
Thank you very much for this instructive lectures today. I would like to share, I'm not going to ask a question, I would like to share about returning properties on individual basis. That is a very tricky issue because not many of the Armenian families still retain their old registrations. But on the basis of organizations, the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, when it assigned, I was personally involved, when it assigned an office of lawyers to return to, or at least to check, to search, they found, and all of them are found in Ankara, in the archives, state archives. One thing is that when you file a lawsuit to return back your properties, you will deal with the Waqf ministry, which is the property endowments ministry. And then this Waqf ministry is not at least keeping or retaining the properties, but it is selling it out to second and third and fourth hand. my view is that this issue should be dealt like state to state, vis-a-vis state to state, and that will only make it successful.
So the Reverend Father, and real quickly, and I'll take 15 seconds to summarize, says pursuing personal rights, the return of individual properties, is rife with challenges and obstacles which are virtually insurmountable. And he talked about his experiences of knowing that there are very few deeds, but there's an answer to that. There are more deeds that we know are out there. His personal experience in Jerusalem, and then there's a repository of the deeds, but the trustee of that repository of the deeds is not returning the land entitled to its rightful owners, but actually alienating them to second and third and fourth parties. You'll hear from Edwin Minassian of the Armenian Bar Association this afternoon, who is going to talk about the domestic situation in the legal courts in the Republic of Turkey in this regard. Prince, go ahead.
Can I just address
Yes.
that very quickly? I don't think our mic is working, but you raise an incredibly important issue, and one of the things we stress in the reparations report is this is about group reparations that are meant for the people as a whole. That's part of why the Return of Churches initiative is so important, because that's sort of the core of Armenian community. And so when we talk about returning churches, we're not talking about individual property, we're talking about the sort of spiritual and even material sort of core of identity in Turkey. That's why it's so important. And I would add that I don't begrudge any individuals for pursuing individual reparations. That's fine. But for me personally, and I think this is true for a lot of Armenians, I don't care individually to get anything from Turkey. But it wouldn't mean that much to me. But what would mean a lot is if I knew that for the next 100 years, Armenia would have no trouble feeding itself as a whole. And I think that's when I think about land, that's what I'm thinking about. How do we have a real vibrant and living community? So thank you for your comments.
Principal Kosakian. Right?
De facto.
Օրին դե ֆակտո կամ հայտարարած է որ ջանչնան հայտարարած ադենը Հայաստանի Հանրապետության փանագը որ հողատարածներուն վրա դե ֆակտո գոյություն ուներ կապ չունի ասի Սևրին հետ կապ չունի Լոզանի հետ ընդունած ադենը որ Հայաստան գջանչնա Հայաստանի դարածքը ինչ էր
Ես հասկացա
դե ֆակտո
Չէ, գիտեք հարցը հետևյալն է, կարծեմ հարցի մեջ մի շատ տարածված սխալի ընկալումը կա։ Պետության ճանաչումը եւ սահմանի ճանաչումը իրար հետ կապ չունի։ Այսինքն, երբ որ դուք ճանաչում ես մի պետությանը, չի նշանակում դու ճանաչում ես պետության սահմանները։ Մոնտեվիդեո կոնվենցիան 33 թվականն ասում է defined territory, այսինքն որոշակի տարածք։ Օրինակներ շատ կան։ 91 թվականին օրինակ Ադրբեջանի անկախությունը ճանաչվել է Ռուսաստանի Դաշնության կողմից, սահմանի վերաբերյալ առանձին պայմանագիր ստորագրվեց մի 10 տարի առաջ։ Այսինքն դա կապ չունի։ Իսկ ավելի կոնկրետ 91 թվականի դեկտեմբերին է ընդհանուր նոտա, սիրկուլյար նոտա ուղարկել Թուրքիան նախկին սովետական հանրապետությունների գոյության ճանաչման վերաբերյալ, հիմա կբացատրեմ դե ֆակտո դե յուրե տարբերությունն ինչն է։ Այդ ընթացքում դեռ պատերազմ 91 թվականի դեկտեմբերին էր նոր էր սկսում, այսինքն մենք առանձնապես շատ բան չենք վերահսկում բանի առումով սա։ Հիմա ինչն է, ասենք, ինչի չի գնում դե յուրե ճանաչման։ Ցյուրիխյան արձանագրությունները, որ գիտեք 2009 թվականի հոկտեմբերի 10-ին ստորագրվեց, որի դեմ ես մի ամբողջ գիրք ունեմ գրած, բայց ինչի Թուրքիան չի վավերացնում, շատ կոնկրետ հարց եմ տալիս, որովհետև դրա վավերացումը կբերի դե յուրե ճանաչման, դե յուրե ճանաչումից բխում է միջազգային պարտավորություններ չհարձակվելու այդ երկրի վրա, այսինքն դե յուրե ճանաչումը ժամանակային սահմանափակում չունի, դե ֆակտո ճանաչումը ոչ մի ապահովություն չի տալի Հայաստան, այսինքն Թուրքիան իր մտքի մեջ դեռ ունի Հայաստանը ոչնչացնելու ծրագիր։ Մենակ այն փաստը, որ ինքը դե յուրե չի ճանաչում, դա վկայությունն է, որ ինքը չի ուզում որևէ միջազգային սահմանափակում դնի։ Տեսականորեն, եթե վաղը Թուրքիան հարձակվի Հայաստանի վրա, մենք չենք կարող UN-ի ՄԱԿ-ի չարտերի 51-րդ հոդվածը վկայակոչել, ասենք Թուրքիան այդ իրավունքը չունի, որովհետև Թուրքիան կասես իրան չեմ ճանաչել դե յուրե։ Այդտեղ շատ բան, խորամանկ խաղեր կա դրա մեջ։
Mr. Sassoonian.
I have have two short questions. One to Professor Dario and the other to Professor Button. Professor Dario, you spoke about truth and reconciliation. I believe your report does include reconciliation. Correct me if I'm mistaken. But forget about the reconciliation. We know what the issues are. But the issue, the word truth, there seems to be a problem because what are we going to do? We're going to create a commission that's going to study whether genocide happened or not? Because that would be exactly what the Turks want. That's what the protocol wants. And if we, I think your report also makes a reference to about the truth, saying membership on the committee, on that committee would be preconditioned by their acceptance of the truth to begin with. But if somebody has to accept that it's genocide to be on a committee to study truth and reconciliation, that kind of a committee has no credibility because already you're making a precondition on participation of the individual.
Before you get to your second question, he didn't say that. What he said is that truth and rectification. In fact, he quoted Nietzsche and saying that objectivity does not mean being mute between truth and falsity. And the work, and you'll answer for yourself, but from what I heard, you're one of the biggest critics of TARC. Because you said that Armenians have no business, no place to sit down to discuss or debate the factuality of the Armenian genocide. If we want to talk about consequences, if we want to talk about post-traumatic stress, if we want to talk about the wrongs that were committed and how we're all individually and collectively supposed to deal with those, then from what I understand from what you said and what I've read of your writings, that's what it is. I think you're one of the big critics of that, right?
You said it better than I could.
Well, I wasn't referring so much to what he said, what the report said, which is a co-author of.
The report specifically uses rectification or reparation and not reconciliation because we're against the idea of reconciliation. We're fine to have good relations between Turks and Armenians. That's a great goal to have. But the only way you get there is through a reparative process. You know, the TARC model or the model that was floated in the protocols in 2009 is really bad. I think it prevents reparations and it also creates the problem of having the truth itself be up for debate or political compromise. So I agree completely with where you're coming from, and I would say our report emphasizes the things that you're concerned about. We are as well.
Fine. The second short question about Ambassador Babian. Ambassador, if I heard you correctly, you said that an American citizen can go to court and file a lawsuit on the Wilson Arbitral Award. What I don't understand, and this isn't your problem, it's our problem as an Armenian community, why, when we have thousands of lawyers and Armenian Bar Association, and we've been talking about this for years, why is nobody ever going to court and get to the bottom of this rather than talk about it for on and on? Thank you.
Well, and the answer to that too, and if I may, is well.
Ես մի բան էլ ավելացնեմ, Արմեն, իմ կարծիքով խնդիրը հետևյալն է եղել, մինչև 1991 թվականը Հայաստանի անկախացումը գնալ եւ դիմել բաններ միշտ հարցեր առաջանալու, իսկ ում պիտի հողերը վերադարձվի։ Չկար Հայաստան, մինչև 91 թվականը չկար Հայաստան, եկեք ընդունենք, որովհետև սովետական Հայաստանը դա Հայաստան չէր, դա ՍՍՀ, այսինքն մեկ այլ պետության վարչատարածքային միավոր էր։ Այ 91 թվից հետո ինչի չեն կար, այդ ուրիշ հարց է, այս նույն հարցը տալիս են ոչ միայն սփյուռքի իրավաբաններն, այլ հատկապես Հայաստան, մեր իշխանություններին, որ դե լավ, այս հարցը չէինք բարձրացնում, նույն arbitral award եւ այլն, հասկանալի է։ Այն ժամանակ կասեն ում եք տալու, բայց 91 թվից հետո հատկապես, երբ որ Ղարաբաղի ճակատամարտը պատերազմները վերջացան, կարելի էր զբաղվել։ Չեն կարել, չգիտեմ։ Իմ կարծիքով մի փոքր մենք չափից ավելի կարևորություն էինք տվել ցեղասպանության ճանաչման այդ գործընթացին, մեզ չգիտես ինչի թվում էր, որ ճանաչման միջոցով մենք կհասնենք հատուցումների։ Մի քիչ շփոթություն կար հոլոկոստի հետ զուգահեռները, որ այդպես չէր, որովհետև Իսրայելը որ հատուցումներ է ստանում ցեղասպանության համար, այսինքն հատուցումներ է ստանում, դա ցեղասպանության համար չի։ Եթե այդ Լյուքսեմբուրգյան համաձայնագրերը կարդաք, այնտեղ շատ հստակ է ասում, որ դա Գերմանիայի օժանդակություն, as Henry said, it's actually according the Luxembourg treaties between Israel and Germany. It's not reparation for Holocaust or blood money. Germany said that voluntarily Germany agreed to support Israel. Այսինքն այդ հատուցումները, որ մինչև մա տալիս է, դա գիտակցելով սեփական մեղքը ինքը օգնում է Իսրայելին, որ կայանա, այդ խնդիրն է, բայց այդտեղ բան չկա, հողի, ասենք blood money, այդ բանի, արյան գինը չկա։ Շատերին թվում է, որ այս բաները, when we speak about reparation, դա արյան գնի հետ կապ ունի, դա արյան գնի հետ կապ չունի, դա
And so we have one or more two questions, but at the end there will be a plenary session for more questions and answers. But let there be no misunderstanding. I cannot, Edvin Minasian can't, Nora Hofsemya cannot, Karni Konyan cannot go into court today and wave in our hands and introduce as exhibits the Treaty of Sèvres. We cannot do that. The entity that can do that is the Republic of Armenia. They can and will one day do it with our help and with our insistence and with our partnership. So it's not so much a question that we have all these hundreds of lawyers who aren't doing anything. Yes, I understand that. But so what we all should do is come up with a common goal, understanding, and strategy to stand behind our Republic of Armenia and to help them get to those international forums that you and I cannot, unfortunately, walk into and say we want justice because of that. The lady in the back there, please. And you'll be the last one, just to be clear.
Ուրեմն Հիլդա Չոբոյան Ֆրանսայեն երկու հարցում բարոն Բապյանին արդյոք այն իրողությունը որ Հայաստանի նոր վերջին հարաբերությունը ինքսինք որպես իրավահաջորդ հրճագած է սովետական Հայաստանի սովետական հարաբերության արդյոք ադի գարկելք չէ որ Սևի տաշնակրի հետևողականորեն կարողանանք Սևի տաշնակրիկը իրակորձել իրակորձել ուրեմն մեկ հարցում երկրորդ ճշտումը իսրայելյան հրեական ցեղասպանության վերաբերյալ հրեական ցեղասպանության հադուցման թղթածրարը շատ բարդ թղթածրար է մեկ ցևի հադուցում չէ եղած 4 տեսակի հադուցումներ եղած են որուն առաջինը եղած է Իսրայելի բայց որբեսի միայն Իսրայելի այդ օրվա իշխանությունները որոնք տակավին ջանցված չէին կամ նոր ջանցված էին 50-ական թվականներում Իսրայել նոր գոյություն ուներ որբեսի սիոնիստական գազམ་ագերբությունը միակը չլա հրյա ժողովուրդը ներկայացնելու Ամերիկայի մեջ կազմվեցավ այդ
ներողություն ծեր հարցումը հստակացնենք
ուրեմն ասել գուզեմ որ միայն եւ միայն pedagogan խնդիր չէ հադուցման խնդիրը նաեւ
հարցումը ինչ է ներողություն
բանակցություններու մեջ պետք է լա բեդությունը եւ սփյուռքի ներկայացությունը այո
շնորհակալություն հաջորդ հարցում No, let's go to the next question. And last question for the morning, and I thank you for your patience.
Thank you, finally. I'm John Kissay, I'm Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Air Force, retired. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching a video, and the president of Armenia, Serge Sarkisian, at the European Parliament, he said that the Republic of Armenia has no territorial demands from Turkey. If Republic doesn't have any demands, who can demand it? Thank you.
Ես ճիշտն ասած չգիտեմ ինչի հիման վրա է Հիլդա Չոբյանը ասում որ Հայաստանը իրեն հռչակել է սովետական Հայաստանի իրավահաջորդը որտեղ մեր անկախության հռչակագրի նախաբանի մեջ հստակ գրված է որ Հայաստանի Հանրապետություն շարունակելով 1918 թվականի մայիսի 28-ին ստեղծված հանրապետության սկզբունքները եւ ժողովրդավարական եւ այլն մեր անկախության հռչակագիրը միանշանակ է որ մենք Հայաստանի Հանրապետության իրավահաջորդն ենք, սա մեկ։ Երկրորդը, Հայաստանի Հանրապետությունը չի կարող սովետական Հայաստանի իրավահաջորդը լինել, որտեղ իրավահաջորդությունը միջազգային իրավունքի մեջ լինում է միայն միջազգային իրավունքի սուբյեկտների միջև։ Իսկ սովետական Հայաստանը չի եղել միջազգային իրավունքի սուբյեկտ, այսինքն նա երբևէ որևէ պետության կողմից չի ճանաչվել որպես անկախ պետություն եւ չի գործել որպես անկախ պետություն։ Ամերիկյան սենատը առնվազն երկու որոշում ունի, որպես ասեն occupied territory, այսինքն ինքը զարթված տարածք է բաները քննարկվել եւ տարբեր դատարաններ կան, դատական վճիռներ կան, այսինքն սեփականության հետ կապված, երբ որ դատարանը որոշել է, որ Հայաստանը դա օկուպացված, այսինքն նման բան չկա։ Հռչակումը չկա առաջինը, երկրորդն էլ չի կարող լինի սովետական Հայաստանի իրավահաջորդ, ինչպես Ադրբեջանը սովետական վրա Ադրբեջանի իրավահաջորդը չի եւ չի կարող լինել։ Այսինքն դա լրիվ այլ պետություն է։
And does anybody want to address the second and last question as to the president of Armenia saying we have no territorial demands?
Okay.
Obviously, that's been a problem. If you look at the last maybe 5 years of discussions of reparations by the Armenian government, we've certainly seen better discussion or better references than in the past. But it's been sort of up and down. So back in April of 2015, there was a lot of strong governmental, I think, rhetoric about reparations. There were more clear, this I remember, I demand slogan. The I demand was very clearly linked to reparations. By July, you started to hear sort of a different, much vaguer reference to what I demand meant and what it could mean in terms of Armenian policy. And so this is the issue that we're seeing, and I think from the diaspora perspective and also within Armenia, people need to be pushing hard to make sure that this is an issue that's on the table constantly, so that through popular pressure, you can't just use the rhetoric sometimes of saying that reparations are a goal and then back off that for political reasons later. I don't know if that helps, but that's my sense.
And finally, the last word is as a bridge from the morning panel, thank you, Colonel, to the afternoon panel. We have with us from Chicago an international legal scholar, Karndi Kerkonian, who's going to address this precise issue in the actual legal precedent standard. And what he's going to, and I'll give you a little preview, and that preview is not only the words you don't say can be, the words you say can be used against you, but the words that you don't say, if you've sat on your hands for too long, if you've allowed for time to lapse, that lapse of time, that assertion of silence will be used against you in a court of international law when we go to say that we want our lands back. So as Professor Theriault said, we have to do things and we have to do them quickly and now and together. Thank you.